Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water. I think it's one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
I'm rarely at home these days, making up for lost time maybe, after going nowhere for more than 60 years. First there was a tour of Europe, and now I'm about to go much further afield. Getting quite used to London, although I still find the traffic quite alarming. And I have an important appointment with the man who organised my European adventure, Mr. Edmund Swinglehurst. He's a real gentleman.
Hello, Hannah.
Hello there, good afternoon. Thank you.
Very nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I want to show you your itinerary.
Oh, thank you.
And then we can go over briefly all the various wonderful places you're going to see.
Yes, thank you.
You're starting, of course, after crossing the Atlantic, you're starting in New York.
Yes. The founder himself looked on. Then we continued over afternoon tea next door.
You know they call it the Big Apple?
I've heard that name.
Yes.
Have you any idea why it's called
I can't think, except that apple is something that everybody eats, and apples have little worms in their core sometimes. Maybe you could say that about New York.
Probably.
And there couldn't be a better way than the way you're going.
No.
QE2, tomorrow.
Yes.
How exciting.
Oh, it is. It's a lovely ship. I'd better go though, or else I'll maybe miss it. Yes, it's moving.
She's moving. Nice to wave.
Yes, it is.
You feel important, don't you?
Yes. Good evening.
This way, please. Miss Hannah Hauxwell.
Good evening, Miss
Thank you.
Hauxwell.
Good
Nice
evening.
to meet you.
Thank you.
Can I introduce my wife?
Hello,
Thank
Miss
you.
Hauxwell. Good evening. It's
Good
lovely
evening.
to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to
Very
meet you.
welcome on the ship.
Thank
Say
you.
one day you'd like to come up and see Hampton the Bridge.
Oh, yes. Yes, please. Yes, I admire the ships and see. Captain John Burton Hall, master of the QE2, a man with a very responsible job. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. He has to supervise the safe passage of 3,000 passengers and crew across the Atlantic. There was a very full programme on board, and I was part of it, appearing on the stage in the ship's theatre. We had a slight problem at first with the microphone. I would like to speak into it, but not to have it for tea.
We came onto the ship with you, Anna, and we recognised you immediately because you hadn't changed, which is lovely. But how do you cope with being recognised everywhere you go?
Well, it's very nice. I don't really mind. The only thing, if you're in a hurry to catch to catch a train or a bus or something. But no, it's very nice for people to say hello, and I don't mind. Thank you.
After you became well known, did you take any precautions for your safety, like a shotgun under the bed at night? Or anything like that?
I always heard that. Did she keep a shotgun under the bed?
No. Someone once said after the first film, when we used to get a few people, someone once said, "Oh well, didn't I think I ought to keep a gun?" And I said, "Well, no, I was more liable to shoot myself than anybody else. I couldn't hit a house end." I was lucky, really.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Barry. Yes, very lucky, because the farm was away from the main road, and unless some crackpot or other had really made it the business to find out where I was, it wasn't easy to find, so I was lucky. Have to be more careful down, mind, I don't maybe bother, at least I haven't been bothering down in the village, but you have to take more pains nowadays than then. I used to go across to neighbours, and I had friends down the dale and come back at midnight or even 1 o'clock in the morning and wouldn't meet anybody. It was all right.
There's nobody else there.
It was lucky.
Okay, I think I know why it is and why millions of people find it so delightful. But what reason do you give, and are you surprised by it?
Why people think you're so delightful, Hannah?
I don't know. That's a mystery to me. I'm just very ordinary, and have my failings very much too. So I have no idea.
There's somebody waving at the back there.
As an American, I'm very honored that you're going to my country. Can you tell me what your biggest anticipation is when you arrive in America?
Oh, that's a splendid last question. What does Hannah anticipate on her impending arrival in America?
I don't. Well, one only imagines that it's very big, of course. But my one, I think, number one ambition's to meet the cowboys, being connected with them.
A short break now, and if you want to see her again, she'll be outside the library. Thank you very much indeed for your reception.
Thank you. A friendly audience, thank goodness. And I was able to meet and talk personally with a lot of them at the book signing which followed.
Right there.
As it turned out, we had to have 2 signing sessions during the voyage. And then I was honoured with an invitation to the bridge. Hello there.
Nice to see you again.
Thank
And
you.
You made it.
Thank you, yes.
Welcome to the bridge.
Thank you very much,
So
thank
where
you.
the brain of the ship is.
Yes,
There's
yes.
the view.
Yes, marvellous, isn't it? Not a soul in sight.
No, the sea's lonely today.
Yes.
Lonely today. But there'll be ships around, and we'll see them on the radar. We can talk
Yes, yes. Oh, well, that's nice, isn't it?
to them. You're on the bridge of the last of the liners. No other ships can go across the North Atlantic at 30 knots.
No.
As we're doing now.
It's a beautiful ship.
And you're being looked after properly?
Oh, very well, thank you. Couldn't be better.
You were dancing late last night?
No, I went to bed.
Oh, all right.
Yes,
Maybe tonight.
yes.
Is it all right? My husband's good at it.
Another privilege, tea with Mrs. Burton Hall, the captain's wife, in their splendid quarters just below the bridge.
Tea, coffee. He does all the sewing and ironing and all that. Nobody was...
She and the captain actually met for the first time on the Kiwi too. It was a very romantic story.
Well,
Shouldn't ask, you know, really.
That's all right. That's okay. I've got a photograph of our first meeting.
Yes.
He was staff captain in the ship 12 years ago, and there was fog, and I went down with a couple of other actors, and we went down to the Queen's room, to go to the captain's reception, and the captain wasn't there because he was in the bridge with fog, and the staff captain was doing the handshakes. And I distinctly remember turning over and saying to Ulick O'Connor, "Oh, it's only the staff captain. This is not going to be worth coming down, it's only the staff captain." And so we've got a photograph of us shaking hands, and I think my face had written all over it, "Oh, it's only you, it's not the captain." So I think things changed quite quickly. We met again a few days later, and 20 minutes later we were getting married.
Fancy. Lovely, isn't it?
That's extremely quick. I haven't met anybody else who's quicker than 20 minutes.
No, and a real fairy story, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I hope the fairy story lasts a long time.
So far it's got a happy ending.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was such a friendly ship, and I got to know lots of my fellow passengers, including some from New York itself.
You're looking forward to seeing New York?
Yes, yes, very much.
Yes.
And the newer New Yorkers, where
We are.
Yes.
We're actually both from New York City, and we just moved out to Long Island 24 years ago.
Yes.
But we go back into the city at least once a month because
Yes.
New York City is the most fantastic place.
To my great relief, the crossing was blessed with good weather. Just as well, I turned out to be rather susceptible to seasickness. The only real problem I encountered was finding my way around. The Kiwi too is so vast.
Yes, I suppose it could be difficult travelling on your own on the QE2 if you're not familiar with where to go and what to do.
Oh yes, well I would get lost. If I set off on my own, I would never be seen again.
Lost at sea.
Yes, true.
Hannah, tomorrow we arrive in America, in New York. Where did you get your image of America from? Tell me about that.
From the cowboy books and cowboy songs and films. I think...
Did you read many cowboy books?
Oh yes, quite a lot. Some, I mean, weren't worth reading, but you know, they were pleasant reading. And one good thing, the good nearly always triumphed over evil, which is, I know it doesn't happen in real life, unfortunately, always, but still it's good to know. But I think that's the main thing. And Big Bill Campbell, we used to listen to Big Bill Campbell. And yes, and the cowboy songs, and went to see Gene Autry. That was the first cowboy film I saw, was Gene Autry.
How old were you?
Goodness, I've no idea. And I've forgotten even whether it was either before the war or since. There was the interest because we all worked on the land somehow or other. And with cattle, albeit in vastly different numbers and ways, and horses. Because the cowboy's horse was his best friend. His life depended on it often enough. So those were important things.
Which part of the American West would you like to go to?
Texas, of course. The biggest and best. They'll tell you anyhow.
Hannah, I think you once told me it was your uncle who was particularly keen on the American West.
Uncle always used to say that if we had the means to travel, he and I, we would part at the Iron Gate and go in opposite directions. I would go east to Paris and he would go west to America and see the cowboys. I've been very fortunate. I was able to go to Paris and I'm on my way to America. He never had that chance, so I'm going for both of us. I'm not a particularly good riser, but I left my bed at 4 o'clock on the morning we sailed into New York Harbour. It was a beautiful dawn, and I was anxious for a glimpse of the Statue of Liberty.
York. You know, when Thomas Cook's son led the first Cook's excursion to New York, he wrote that he'd never seen such a beautiful place with all the green trees and the wooden Swiss chalets.
Yes, a bit different. It's probably altered a lot since he saw it. Probably not for the better either. It's too far away anyway to see yet, isn't it?
Well, that's the famous Manhattan skyline. What do you think to that?
Well, I'd prefer Thomas Cook's green trees.
You see the Empire State?
No.
Oh, well, we'll get a closer look. We'll get a closer look at that later. But it's a pretty sight. It's a beautiful morning.
Yes, it is. That is true.
Good morning, America.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Good morning, America. Better still, good morning, Uncle Sam. Sounds nice to have a relative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They're blotting out the sun, aren't they? Those high buildings. They're unbelievable, aren't they?
The Empire State is just coming up there, a building in the distance with a spire.
Yes, like a church with a...
It used to be the tallest building in the world, very famous. Did you ever see the film King Kong?
No.
Oh, he climbed that.
Yes. Let's see. Have some of these outgrown it in size?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Huge. Grey. Let's hope they have a bit of greenery somewhere.
Central Park?
Yes, they'll need it.
It's an imposing sight, though, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yes, of its kind, man-made.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the plaza.
Thank you.
The
very
bellman
much.
will take you back up to your suite.
Yes, thank you.
Let me escort you to your room,
Thank you.
please. This way, please.
It's a beautiful place,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's like Buckingham Palace.
Right. This is our old
lovely.
hotel, but it's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes, it is.
This way,
Thank
please.
you. It's magnificent. It was all a bit overwhelming. I had been warned that New York would be like this. Anyway, I was taken on a guided tour of Fifth Avenue, starting with the amazing Trump Tower.
The excesses of the 80s that people talk about in New York, and Donald Trump and all of his millions of dollars he made in real estate, and then he got into trouble after he built things like this.
Yes.
But very glitzy and I think it must be close to 3 stories.
Yes,
that it goes up.
yes, I wondered how high it was, and people are walking about.
Yes,
right up there. Oh, the glass roof.
Yes, and sort of an atrium. Live plants, and there's shops all on these different levels, little exclusive boutiques.
Yes. It's lovely and cool.
Yes, it feels terrific.
And the greenery.
Yes. Down the avenue.
Like we saw. The stair, was it?
Let's look what's in the window here.
Oh, yes.
Isn't that pretty?
Sorry?
Isn't that pretty?
Yes, it's pretty. I don't really see a lot. The flowers are pretty, but I don't really see a lot more to be a famous
It's not a
window.
very big bauble, is it?
No, it isn't. No, it's nothing to write home about. Really.
But it is Tiffany and Company,
Oh,
which
yes.
is one of the biggest
yes.
jewelry places in the world.
Oh, yes.
Very
yes.
extravagant.
Yes. I found seeing more interesting things in our own
I
jewelry
believe
shop
you have.
window at home.
Oh, now that's a little bit better, huh?
It's a bit better,
Yes,
yes, they're pretty. And the brooch is nice.
Look at the size of those diamonds.
I was glad of a bit of peace and a cup of tea after all that. For me, tea is one of life's essentials.
Right. How's the tea in New York then, Hannah?
Well, not as good as we have. It's something similar to what, not much better than we had in Europe. I thought they would have been more civilised and know how to make tea properly. A lot of people coming from our country originally. No, it's the system of hot water and bring the tea bags and then you have to make your own. But I mean, you really need boiling water to make good tea.
All right, Hannah, apart from the tea, how's New York?
Well, it's very hot and very busy and very noisy. Oh, I think London's same to what it is in New York, sanity in London compared to here.
How would it be improved, do you think?
Oh, a lot more trees. There's not enough trees. And all the buildings, see, the towers so high and not the space. Spacious in a way, they're not narrow streets, but with the buildings being so high, they're a bit overpowering. No, there's nothing like a few trees to brighten things up. Man-made structures, they're marvellous. You wonder how they've ever managed to get them so high and how they ever stand, but it takes the Creator's hand to make it a lot better.
Is there anywhere in New York that you haven't seen, which you would like to see?
There's a lot that I haven't seen, but in particular, because it's close at hand and can see from my window the lovely park. It must be a godsend to people living in this big, bustling city. It's customary to tour Central Park in an old-fashioned manner, and I took the opportunity to find out if my guide knew the answer to a certain question. How does New York come by the name of the Big Apple?
Well, that was begun back in the age of jazz, when jazz was very big down in New Orleans, where it still is. I think about the time of the 30s, and to get a gig or a show up in New York for a jazz musician was a very big deal.
Yes.
And to them, it was coined as to get a gig in the Big Apple. And
Yes.
that's how it started.
But why they use the name Big Apple? How did that? It's the name Big Apple, how it originated.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how they came across using that particular fruit.
No.
But I guess it's just taking a bite out of the Big Apple.
A bite out of the apple.
It meant that you had really achieved something.
Yes.
Look see, he's training for skiing.
Oh,
See
yes,
his
goodness. Everything.
This originally was pig farms and a dump.
Yes.
And at that point, during the late 1850s, a number of prominent people got together and decided that they needed to save a lot of open land because it was being eaten up very quickly by mansions along Fifth Avenue and so forth. And
it's very fortunate that they did.
Yes, very fortunate for us today.
Because people, where there haven't been any greenery or gardens, wouldn't have had anywhere. So it's must keep people sane.
Yes.
This.
Yes, it's a sanctuary.
Yes. Next week, I visit the people who sought sanctuary in America from religious persecution. The Amish folk, who chose to live as their forefathers did.
Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water. I think it's one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
All right, folks, I would like to welcome everybody here to the Liberty Bell. Folks, what we have is actually a big old broken bell that doesn't ring anymore. And yet people often say that it rings better than ever. In fact, that line around the top is what makes this the Liberty Bell. And it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Now that was not put there for the American Revolution. That was put there to celebrate Pennsylvania's colonial liberties. And they were very substantial, especially regarding religious expression. Pennsylvania was one of the very few places where people could come and worship as they pleased. The Amish who came from Germany, the Welsh Quakers, they could worship freely here. And it shows that right from the very start, this bell had some symbolism for liberty.
You don't have to travel far from the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia to find the Amish. They live just down the highway in Lancaster County. They call themselves plain people, and that describes them very well indeed. They rely on the horse both for personal transport and for working on the land. Electricity is not permitted, and they conduct entirely separate lives. All those not of their faith are called English, no matter where they come from. They wear heavy, old-fashioned clothes and seemingly always cover their heads in public, even the children. And there are some curious place names in Amish country. The way they travel about creates problems in the centres of the small towns they inhabit, particularly when the tourists drive in to see them, and a lot do. In my experience, horses and cars don't mix too well. Some of the advertising in the streets is a little odd too. Generally, they avoid contact with the tourists, staying well in the background when they work in the shops. As you would expect, most jobs are done by hand, not by machine, and they are justly famed for their beautiful quilts. Now, quilting is something I am familiar with because my family made them by hand too, but not as good as this. The Amish avoid cameras. The quilting lady, by the way, was not Amish, but had been taught by them. So we tried to keep a discreet distance when we did film them. It's very good, so good it looks like machine stitching. So good. Mm-hmm. Yes. Or back stitching. I do a lot of back stitching. Makes a good, strong job. Yes. It's beautiful work. How much is, if one wanted to buy a quilt like this,
This
how much would it be
probably
worth?
be between $700 to $900.
Yes. I haven't much idea what that is in English money, but... I've never seen them before, heard of them.
What's he doing exactly?
There could be rollers behind, I'm not sure.
What do rollers do to the land?
Well, now then, I don't know when. I should think after, ready for seeding, after it's all been worked. I think they'll roll it and then when we put the seed in. But you see, I'm not familiar with this kind of, you know, with cropping, where they grow the crops.
But you used horses in the old days.
Oh,
on
yes.
a cart, right?
Yes, all horses. Yes, all horses. I wasn't surprised to see that steam trains still ran in these parts, mostly for tourists, of course. And one place they go to, would you believe, is Paradise.
Paradise, change for Coatesville, Paoli, North Philadelphia, Trenton, Newark, and New York. Ladies and gentlemen, believe it or not, this is Paradise. Greatest status that most of us do on a private railroad car of lavish design.
Doesn't look much like Paradise to me, Hannah.
Listen, I think we've left it.
Private cars to Paradise.
As I said earlier, the horse and the motor car do not go well together. We chanced upon a most unfortunate accident.
They had no business trying to go around that team. No business.
No, we were
and then they hit you. They wanted to pull
what
the
happened?
brakes.
What happened?
Did you call the police?
Well,
what happened exactly?
Yeah, somebody called the police. We were coming this way, and our horse was up there.
I'm afraid the horse had been injured. I don't know how badly. It doesn't always show at first.
Get a blanket on him too, if you can. That's me now. Du sätter nash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then from here on out. No, hey, let's go out there, Mr. Captain.
All right.
No,
I wouldn't move anything till they get here.
Yeah, I think it's better.
David.
Captain?
Hey.
Es ist eine Maschine den Führer. Not your brakes to you then. She had claims that can brakes cut.
It was difficult to understand much of what the two Amish gentlemen were saying, other than the car's brakes had apparently failed. But there was a reason for that, as I found out when I met Mr. Sterling Shern. He used to be a lawyer, but now runs a guest house, and is an authority on the Amish way of life. One hears they're rather a shy, retiring people and live same as I used to do years ago. Not all that long ago, come to that.
No, well, yes, we do. Most of our neighbors here are Amish, and there are several different orders of Amish. The people who live in this area are the Old Order Amish, which is the most conservative of all of the Amish groups. There's several that are referred to as New Order Amish also. And some of those groups actually will have cars and telephones and some of the modern conveniences that the rest of us do. But all of our neighbors here are Old Order Amish, which means that they, among other things, don't use, or they don't own cars, they don't have telephones in their homes, they don't have electricity, and a lot of the other conveniences that we take for granted.
No, I can't. I mean, I lived like that, but I appreciated the modern things when I was lucky enough to have them, and have no wish to go back to being without them. But then, if that's the way they like to live, well, everybody has a right to please themselves.
Well, it's a matter of, a lot of this is a matter of holding their community together.
Yes.
And, for example, the prohibition on automobiles is based on the fact that if everybody had a car, they would go off on weekends just like the rest of us do, and it would weaken their community.
Are they banned from anything, say, can they fly?
Well, there's a plane going overhead creating a little bit of noise, and the answer to your question is they can use almost any form of transportation with the exception of flying.
Yes.
As long as they stay on the ground, they can ride in a car, they can ride in a bus or a van or go on a boat or a train, but there is a prohibition on flying.
Yes. Have there any problems with young people wanting to fly and have more modern things? Because, I mean, there's nothing like the boys wanting a motorcycle, for instance, or something like that. So how do they do?
Well, it's interesting. They keep between 85 and 90% of the children in the church,
Yes.
which is surprising in some respects given the obvious interaction in this
Yes.
area between the English and the Amish.
Yes.
And on the one hand, it's surprising. On the other, it really isn't, because if you look at the way the community brings their children up, it's they're given a choice, but it really isn't a choice. An Amish child doesn't learn to speak English until he goes to school in first grade.
Yes.
And so for the first 7 years, even though he's living in the middle of a modern American society, he really doesn't interact with it because he can't speak English.
No.
And so when they go to school, they begin to learn to speak English, and still don't really have much chance of interaction because they go to their own schools. They have one-room schoolhouses that take care of the children from 1st through 8th grade, and then
Yes.
they leave the school system after 8th grade.
Yes.
And you know from living in farm country that as children grow up on farms, they begin to take on more and more chores
Yes.
and responsibilities, so that when the children get out of school, even first graders go home and they have chores to do.
Yes.
So they don't have much chance to interact with the rest of the world at that point.
No.
And it's only after they are out of school and begin to take jobs outside the home that they have any real contact with the outside world.
So what language do they speak then?
Well, they speak at home a language that's referred to as Pennsylvania Dutch. Now, it really isn't Dutch. Dutch is a corruption of Deutsch,
Yes.
because most of the settlers in this area were from Germany.
And it seems they still have a sentimental link to the country they fled all those years ago, as I discovered when I went to an auction. To my surprise, fell into conversation with an Amish gentleman. He wanted to know if Yorkshire was anywhere near Germany. I was born and lived in Yorkshire a long time till they moved the boundaries.
How far from Germany are you?
Well, England's on its own, you see. We're across the channel. Have you heard of the English Channel?
Yeah.
Between the continent. So we're across the channel, quite away from Germany.
Can you speak German?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, yeah? Actually, you say I can't. That's English, that's for sure.
Yeah. You could buy most things for the farm there, but the main business was the buying and selling of horses. I used to have difficulty understanding what the auctioneer was saying at the markets back home, but I could scarcely make out a word here. Could have been a foreign language as far as I was concerned. What if anybody once made somebody outside the Amish religion and wanted to marry? How would they fare then?
Well, they couldn't if they wanted to become a member of the church. Now, you don't become a member of the church, the Amish church, until you're baptized.
No.
And one of the features of the Amish religion is that you're not baptized until you're an adult. and are old enough to make a conscious decision whether you want to join the church or not.
Yes.
Which was one of the reasons they were persecuted back in the 1500s up until the point they finally left Europe. But if you have not joined the church and decide that you're not going to, then you can go ahead and marry somebody who isn't Amish. You see some funny conflicts around here. Frequently in the fall, you'll see the farmers out in the field baling hay.
Yes.
And they will have the horses pulling a piece of farm equipment.
Yes.
And mounted on the farm equipment is a gasoline-powered baler. Some of them will have tractors on their farms, but they're not allowed to use them in the field.
No.
They will use the drive shaft from the tractor to power conveyor belts and that sort of thing in the barn, or to operate threshing equipment in the barn, but they really don't use the tractors in the field at all. They are very social. And sometimes you don't get that feeling from some of the movies that have been made. For example, when Witness was shot back in, I believe, 1984, there are moments in the movie where you get the feeling that they're fairly cold and distant, and that they will interact with you only on very limited terms. And what we discovered was they're people just like everybody else.
Yes.
And that their principal leisure time activity is socializing. It's not going to the movies or malls or shopping or the things that we and our children do, but it's the old-fashioned family and community social activity.
Yes, which is very good, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's funny, back during the last election here in the United States, President Bush used to talk a lot about family values, and we used to laugh because I don't think that much of what they talked about had to do with family values. If they wanted to discover what family values were about, they should have come here and talked to the Amish.
On my last day in Lancaster County, I was granted an unusual privilege. Even the more relaxed of the plain people shunned the camera, but Mr. Jack Mayer decided he would talk to me, farmer to farmer. So have you been having horses all your life?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I think my first recollection of a horse is when I was about 2.5.
Yes.
I was riding on a wood wagon with my uncle. He was bringing in poles.
Yes.
And I remember saying to him, Uncle, I want to drive the horse. Let me drive the horse.
Yes.
And of course he wouldn't.
No, no.
These farms here, you know, are dairy farms.
Yes.
Most Amish people farm for milk.
Yes.
They raise corn and hay and I think there are about 4,800 small farms in this county.
Yes.
Tremendous amount of cows, 92,000 dairy cows. The soil here is a red clay and a limestone.
Yes.
And you know, when the settlers first came over here, of course, the English and the Germans, they came from, I suppose, where you folks live, in Yorkshire and different places like that, but from the Rhine Valley, and they recognized this red clay limestone soil was the best.
Yes.
So they settled here.
Yes. It's lovely farming country, I would think.
Most folks are up here about 4:30 in the morning.
Yes.
And by then you're milking cows. Breakfast is about 7 o'clock.
Yes.
And then the children get off to school at 7:30. And then school's at 8. And of course they're at school while Dad is out working the horses. And lunch is about 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Then you put the horses away about 3.
Yes.
And you're back milking about 4:30.
Yes.
You might have supper at 4 o'clock. We don't take our supper later. Usually, not usually, because you want to get to bed by 7:30.
Yes. Then Mr. Mayer invited me and our camera crew to supper with his family, a very rare honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is my wife. ham loaf without ham.
Oh,
I don't know what the pork raise will say about that, but it's beef. It's beef and turkey, smoked turkey.
Oh, yes, it'd be lovely. Thank you.
Lancaster County is noted for meatloafs,
Yes.
different types.
Yes, it looks lovely. Mr. and Mrs. Mayer have 6 children, all with lovely biblical-sounding names. Jessica, Sarah, Rachel, Miriam, Joshua and Caleb. After the magnificent meal, the children were allowed to leave the table, some to play outside, whilst Mr. Mayer explained some of the differences in the Amish community. What group of your religion do you belong to?
Well, we're called Brethren.
Yes.
There are 3 groups of plain people, or plain-dressing people in Lancaster County. Amish, and Brethren, and Mennonites.
Yeah.
Now, I could illustrate it this way. The Amish, for instance, in Lancaster County, would have gas refrigerators and gas freezers. They would have gas ranges. However, they might have a wood cook stove or a coal range in the kitchen to cook on in the wintertime. Obviously, it gets very hot here. Some days can be what we call dog days, 95% humidity and 100 degrees in heat. So you don't want to have a wood kitchen range going in, in the house.
No, you don't.
So they have this outside. But the Old Order Mennonites then, as opposed to the Amish, having indoor plumbing, for instance, there would be no indoor plumbing. There would be no electricity. There would be no sinks in the house, usually. They have an old-fashioned dry sink with 2 bowls. You wash in one, rinse in the other, and out the door the water goes.
Yes.
So they would not, for instance, ride at all in a car. Some Amish would rent a car, not to drive themselves, but to hire a driver or a van to go places. So there are some differences in the standards in the groups, but as far as the theology is concerned, all 3 are very similar.
Yes. You yourself a rather more relaxed type of your faith. The more stricter people, how do they look on you more, say having us, for instance, how do they feel about you generally, living rather being more relaxed, more?
I don't think that there's a problem in that respect. I was visiting with an Amish minister, and I asked him a question about a particular subject. And even though we live a little different, we have electricity, and of course we still have the horse, but we could use motor vehicles if we want to.
Yes.
I asked him something anyway. He said, Amish. I said, I know what it was. I said, as an Amish minister, I said, what do you think about that? And he said, Amish, he says. Amish, he says. What I think about that? He says, why? You know what I think. You're as Amish as I am.
Yes.
So there's a good relationship, and although there's a different standard among the various churches, we don't find a conflict normally.
No. Well, that's very good, but because after all, people should have a certain freedom to do what they want and think what they want, and if they're good people, a bit of freedom's a good thing. The children obediently returned for the climax of a fascinating evening, a hymn, Amish style. Next week I visit Gettysburg, a place the Amish would definitely have shunned, and take a tour of the White House in Washington.
Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water, I think, is one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
Gettysburg. It would be just another dot on the map of America, but for 3 days in the summer of 1863, when the opposing armies in the American Civil War came face to face.
Well, Hannah, this was where the American Civil War was won, or lost, depending on which side you were. Quite a place, isn't it?
Yes, it's rather a strange place. I think places where there's been fighting are. All wars are bad, but civil wars are worse, where friends and family can be on opposite sides. I don't really know a lot about the American Civil War. I know it happened, but I don't know a lot about it. Why the whys and wherefores? Why did they have a war? What was the reason for the war?
Over the question of slavery, which the South wanted to retain, that was one of the reasons. I suppose it was basically a power struggle between the North and the South. They had different ideas. I think the South wanted independence from the North.
Yes.
And
so the North were against slavery?
Yes.
Well, that was a good, that was a good reason. The battleground is now a national memorial, with dozens of very impressive monuments erected to the memory of those who fell. Yes, all wars are dreadful. There's something in the saying that there's no winners, only losers in the end.
Despite this murderous fire, a group of Confederates overran the Union position at the angle in the stone wall, and led by Brigadier General Lewis Armistead, reached the clump of trees. Here,
the full story of the last day of the battle is told to tourists in the Circularama. It houses a remarkable work of art, 26 feet high and 365 in length, painted in 1884. The sound effects are almost too realistic.
Battle of Gettysburg was over. In 3 days, 51,000 men were casualties, dead, wounded, or prisoners of war. On July 4th, General Lee began his retreat to Virginia. The war would go on but the South's high hopes for victory and independence had been dealt a mortal blow at Gettysburg. As one Confederate survivor of Pickett's charge wrote, "We gained nothing but glory and lost our bravest men." We gained nothing but glory and lost our bravest men.
Only numbers, no names. 425 people, unknown. Poor souls. Abraham Lincoln had the last word about Gettysburg. He came here after the war had been won, and he was the president of the entire country. Stood in this graveyard and uttered the immortal Gettysburg Address.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Washington, D.C. is just a few hours' drive down the road from Gettysburg. I arrived in style to see a familiar name. Oh, Bellevue Hotel. It's home from home for me. Much grander though. My little cottage is the same name. This is much grander. Thank you. I liked Washington because it has a lot of green spaces. But first I visited another sad place. The Vietnam War Memorial is a black marble wall, necessarily stretching a very long way because all the names of the Americans who perished in that conflict are inscribed here. Understandably, it is a far busier place than Gettysburg. Rose for remembrance.
$58,000 men, Hannah.
Yes.
All dead.
A lot. You can't imagine all the names, all these names. Yes.
Took over 10 years, and it was 3 days, of course, in Gettysburg, but at least their names are here.
Yes. Yes, I suppose that's something.
Contrast to Gettysburg.
Yes, yes, where there wasn't known graves, names unknown. Sad places. Sad places.
There's a helicopter. That was one of the great weapons of the Vietnam War. Do you remember?
I heard of it, but I don't really know a lot about it. Yeah. Was it the North and the South, same as the Civil War, but in Vietnam?
Yeah.
North and South in opposition.
South and North again.
Yes.
And the North won yet again in that particular conflict.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was it the worst side won?
I'm afraid so.
Yes.
I'm afraid the Americans were defeated.
Yes, which was sad, in vain.
Yeah. All in vain.
They died in vain. No, it's still remembered, I think, with a lot of unhappiness and people who experienced it have some unhappy memories.
There's a lot of tears shed in this place.
Yes, I know I've heard people say perhaps on the radio, and you know, there was a lot of happy memories, and sometimes they felt themselves forgotten. The capital of America is a very spacious city which reminded me very much of Paris. And it's full of wonderful monuments dedicated to the great names of American history. I was particularly impressed by the Lincoln Memorial. Abraham Lincoln, the man who came from log cabin to White House. That's the ideal. It was a shame he also was assassinated.
Yes.
Been a sad history of fate of several American presidents.
Yes, I know. It's extraordinary. They seem to assassinate their very best, don't they?
Yes.
John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
What a memorial, though.
Oh, it's magnificent. A magnificent building.
Yeah.
And then he is sitting in the chair, presumably a chair, I don't know, but it's magnificent. And in marble, I think a lot of it.
White marble?
Yes.
I think it's all white marble.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. Just tribute to a wonderful president. Time for a quick rest and a glance at the Capitol building before proceeding to the most famous building in the whole country.
Right, Hannah, there it is, the White House. What do you think?
Oh, it's a thrill to see it. I've often, you know, it's one of the places I would like to see. Maybe not as big as I imagined it would be, but we are a distance from it.
That's because we can't get any closer. They won't even allow an Instamatic in there.
Oh yes, I realise that.
We're banned.
That we haven't any choice. Buckingham Palace is much better to see, and just what we can see and what we know of the palace, the palace is more imposing. A lot of country houses in England are more imposing, I would think. However, it's a thrill to see it. It looks very nice, standing with the green in front and all the trees. Looks very pleasant. Where one of the most powerful men in the world live.
I would imagine he's the most powerful now.
Probably, yes. Could be a matter of opinion in some quarters, but we think so, yes.
Who among the presidents who've lived in the White House have impressed you?
Well, Franklin D. Roosevelt, because he was very kindly towards us during the war, and I think and Churchill, Winston Churchill and him seemed to have a good relationship. In fact, Winston Churchill's mother was American, I believe, so they had a good relationship. Unfortunately, because we were good in heart and spirit, but we needed material help, which they backed us up with, and then eventually came into the war. So I think he was a good president. Quite a few others along the way. Was it Truman followed him? Oh dear, Johnson, Eisenhower. Some I can't remember, but there was John Kennedy, who was, stood out. And I'm going to put my money on Jimmy Carter. I liked him, the man who walked to the White House on his own 2 feet without any pompous ceremony, because it's the man that counts when all's said and done.
You like Jimmy Carter?
I do, yes. I'm just sorry he hadn't, because it's a demanding thing, and they're not trained for it, haven't experienced as our parliamentary people have. But I think if he should have had another chance, because he had the problem with the hostages, but there's been problems with hostages since which haven't been easy to handle. He was maybe the first in line. So I think, you know, I wish he'd had a second chance.
You don't think he got a fair deal then?
I think if they'd given him a second chance, as they have done other presidents, I liked him anyhow, for what it's worth.
What was it about him that you liked?
I think simplicity, without, you know, the pomp and ceremony, and I think he was a good man.
He was a farmer, wasn't he? That's what you like about him.
Yes, well, that could be a bit of that too. As I liked Abraham Lincoln from log cabin to White House. It's not too bad to follow in his footsteps from Peanut Farm to White House. Tea in a pot, English style. What a relief. It can be so difficult to obtain a decent cup of tea in America. The hotel bar was modelled on the lines of a British pub, or an American interpretation of one. They even served yards of ale, with half yards for the ladies, of course. The public is admitted to the White House on a first-come, first-served basis, but they insist that everyone leave their cameras behind. And they were worried about something else I might be carrying. As we went in, rather a strange incident. The man at the entrance asked, had I any matches? I couldn't think what he was on about, and then he said that the British had burnt it down. The visit didn't last long, and there was no glimpse of the new president. But I do know he was around somewhere, because I met a young lady who had been privileged to meet him that very morning.
Lisa, what happened this morning?
We saw Bill Clinton.
Oh,
we met Bill Clinton over by the Washington Memorial.
Oh, yes. Oh, that was very exciting.
What was he doing, Lisa?
He was jogging around all the cars.
Yep.
Yes.
And that was very nice. And he shook our hand.
Oh, that was
And then he commented on Lisa's sweater. We had a very nice visit, right?
It's a lovely one, isn't it?
He's a nice guy.
Yes. Oh, well, that was very nice then. It's been a memorable day and a lucky day for you.
Lucky day.
We were hoping to see him, but it's
Never know.
right.
Never know.
But we've been in the White House, which is lovely. I'm quite happy with that.
Yep.
Place you were lucky.
Yep.
Something for you
We'll
to
have
remember.
to jog tomorrow, maybe.
Yes.
And maybe you'll see him.
Yes, well, you never know. You never know. Thank
All right,
you.
take care now.
Thank you.
Okay,
You
bye-bye.
too. You too.
Shake your hand.
Yes. Enjoy the lovely sweater. It's beautiful.
Now, give me some more of your impressions of the White House and what you saw there.
Sorry, I'm all woolly-headed. We went into the oak-panelled entrance and long passages and looking into rooms, lovely rooms. Smaller than the palace, but still magnificent.
Smaller than Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
Of course, you've been there, haven't you?
Well, just through it, just briefly through it. In at one side and out at the other. But no, it was lovely, well worth seeing. I enjoyed seeing it. It seemed to combine grandeur but comfort as well. modest, in a modest way, not overdone. And the portraits, I enjoyed seeing the portraits. Apparently it's been the custom to keep the 7 last presidents on view, and I think President Clinton's altered that custom, and I think he's removed some and replaced them with others. But it's his house, and if he likes them, and the and the people he likes, why not?
Who has he removed?
Can't see President Nixon, and President Reagan's up. We did see a portrait of President Reagan up the stairs. I can't remember what the others.
Where it could be missed, yeah.
Yes.
Who would he replace them with?
Roosevelt, and sorry, I can't think who. Harry S. Truman.
What about the First Ladies you saw?
Oh, well, there was a portrait of Mrs. Reagan. She looked what we call like a water rail.
What's that?
Well, very thin, or if it had been a rake dressed up, she was so thin, it could have been draped on a rake.
What do you think of the Reagans?
Well, their policies and mine weren't. I admired Jimmy Carter. I think he was a good man and meant well. I don't know whether President Reagan, where his acting began, ended in real life began. And also they had similar policies to Mrs. Thatcher, and I didn't like them at all. Maybe all right for certain sections of the country, but not so good for others. No, I think he should have stuck with acting, really. He maybe never finished acting, I don't know. Maybe a good man in his way, but not as pleasant.
I didn't know that you had these political convictions.
Oh, yes. I'd better pipe down on them. My visit to Washington began on a sad note and ended on one too, when I visited the Arlington Military Cemetery, where many thousands of Americans who fell in battle from the Civil War onwards are buried.
Order.
I watched the guard of honour at the tomb of the unknown warrior, but the main purpose was to visit the grave of President John F. Kennedy. An eternal flame for a tragic president, and nearby the final words of his inaugural address, carved in stone.
Great words.
Yes, they are, and remembered.
So, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Next week, I step back into the colonial past in Virginia and give a lesson in tea making, English style.
Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water. I think it's one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
Richmond, Virginia was the capital of the southern states of America during the Civil War. This is the hotel staircase, which is said to have been the model for the one used in the final sequence of Gone with the Wind.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
That film will, I suppose, always be the image of the American Civil War to most of the world, and there are plenty of reminders of the conflict in Virginia, where many of the battles were fought. But Virginia was also one of the first places colonized by the British in the 17th century, and here in Williamsburg they have preserved and restored one of the early settlements.
In Colonial Williamsburg we have 88 original buildings, and the Carlton House here is one of them. And then the other buildings have been reconstructed on their original foundations. So hopefully this town does look fairly close to the way it did 200 years ago.
And still the King's Arms, the King's Arms Tavern.
Yes. Now after the Revolution, that tavern became known as the Eagle.
Ah.
Yes. But we've set things to just before the Revolution. They really made a big effort 200 years ago in Williamsburg to have a planned city and to have these well-established government buildings.
Yes.
And it's a bit of an effort on the part of the colonists to transpose this English government and culture in an area where only 50 years earlier there were Indians running. As we're going towards the Capitol, you'll notice that the buildings are getting closer together. And so even though the town was only a mile long, still there was a downtown, there was an uptown. So by the palace, that was uptown. Now this is downtown. And so you'll start to see a lot more shops and a lot more taverns.
And an 18th century apothecary. You have a lot of medicines here.
I have quite a few medications. These are actually all imported from around the world through England. So we have all the latest in South American remedies and Chinese remedies and African remedies. And can I offer you any today? Or
I don't think so. There's nothing the matter with me, and I think maybe the cures may be worse than the disease.
Possibly.
Yes.
Possibly. It could happen. We stock some mercury over in one of our drawers, so I think you might want to stay away from that one.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't know what it does, except used to be in barometers. I don't know whether
there you go. Yes.
No.
Definitely. I have some other medications here that are interesting. These are Now these are still on the market. This is an oil of turpentine.
Yes, what is it?
It's a good rub for aching muscles.
Oh, that would be
rheumatism,
good. Yes.
arthritis, any aching muscles here that need to be taken care of? No, very healthy people. And camphorated oil, which would pretty much help you out.
Yes,
so
yes, that's
very
one's
effective.
heard of.
Yes. Helps you breathe.
Yes.
Rub it on the chest.
Yes.
And the lozenges that I have right here are made out of chalk and oyster shell, which is your best source of calcium. Very good for indigestion and dyspepsia and food poisoning. And we hope you don't get that while you're here.
No. Thank you. I do think that there's a lot of things growing. You mentioned South America.
Right.
They say there's a lot of, if it could be found, I think there's answers in what grows in South America, maybe to modern day diseases.
Definitely, yes.
I like the jars, by the way. Aren't they lovely?
They are wonderful. They're all original containers up there. Basically for holding things like you mentioned from South America, we were getting a Peruvian bark, which is known as quinine or quinine today from South America for treating all of the fever problems that existed during that time. Some doctors also feeling in the 18th century that since they now understood circulation of blood, that perhaps if your blood was moving rapidly through the system, it was causing heat and friction, and some bloodletting at times being done to reduce the heat in the body. One form of bloodletting was using leeches. Would you like to see our leeches? Are you in need of? Or?
No, thank you very much.
No bruises or swelling or anything that needs to be?
No, thank you. But if you would...
I'll show it to you anyway. Maybe
you would like to.
There he is. You're right there. He's being rather quiet today, but sometimes he's rambunctious. They were used basically in the 18th century to reduce bruising and swelling, because one leech will drink out about 2 spoonfuls of blood and indeed get rid of that bruise. And then when they're full, after about 30 minutes, they actually drop off, which is generous of them. But
it is.
Yes, and used primarily on very small children in very delicate areas of the skin.
Yes.
Because they're not something that are poisonous or painful.
Williamsburg was a planned city. We're on Duke of Gloucester Street.
Yes.
And the city was designed by yet another royal governor.
Yes.
And of course he's got to keep the Queen happy. And their apparent was the Duke of Gloucester.
Yes, of course.
What?
That's lovely across there, isn't it, the green?
Right, this was Market Square. And it probably would not have been as pastoral 200 years ago, because this was where the market was, being the center of town. That large white house over there, that was the home of Peyton Randolph.
Who was he?
He was the first president of the Continental Congress. Except when he went to the Continental Congress in 1774, they were hoping that it would evolve into a North American Parliament. So George III would have a British Parliament and he'd have an American Parliament.
Yes.
It didn't work out that way, obviously.
No, it doesn't always, does it? And in one sense, the widow of Peyton Randolph is still alive. Williamsburg is populated with actors and actresses playing parts from the past with some vigour.
Why, Miss Hannah, I am so delighted to make your acquaintance.
you.
I'm very happy to have you at my humble abode. Won't you please come and settle yourself right here? What a pretty bonnet. You may lay it down beside my own.
Thank you.
Is it the latest fashion then in the mother country?
Oh, probably, yes.
Oh, it's very pretty. It's only the finest Megan straw. Indeed, forgive me for not laying a bountiful tea board for us, but it's not yet time. We in the colonies observe tea a bit later, I'm understanding, than you do at the mother country, where all is the latest fashion. But I am here to welcome you in our gracious home.
Thank you.
You see, I have always prided myself, and forgive me for a little bit of prideful boastfulness here, that I have been, well, gracious hostess to the finest sort. And I can see, madam, by your every deported, your manner, your very visage, that you are the finest sort. And so I'm most delighted to welcome you.
Thank you for the compliment.
My good husband, you see, was Speaker of our House of Burgess. This capital city is known for its government, Perhaps we'd best not talk on matters of government after the unpleasantness which now, I'm afraid, occurs betwixt the mother country and our fair colony.
Yes, perhaps. There are pleasant things to talk about.
Yes, I was always told that ladies should not settle themselves on politics at all. It doesn't do well, does it?
Perhaps.
One is always better off to talk on, other folk, balls and assemblies, and, what is the latest fashion?
Yes.
Did you have any curiosity about our folk? Do you find them, well, civilized?
Oh, very civilized, very nice people.
I've been told that many in the mother country think that out here in the colony, well, there are many governors' wives who don't wish to come out here. They think it is a wild sort of place.
They have the wrong impression.
You are so well spoken, madam. Surely you can be a fine ambassador for us here, indeed.
What a wonderful performance. I was told she is an actress of some repute, but I certainly needed a rest and a cup of tea after that experience. The tavern down the street from Mrs. Randolph's residence was also run on colonial lines, with an appropriately dressed and very accomplished fiddler. Afterwards, music of a more basic kind when I met a gentleman playing the part of a freed slave.
Yeah. When they heard drumming in the 19th century, they thought they were trying to say something. Music was used a lot to talk about what was going to go on, and they had music to dance by, they had music to relax by, they had music for everything. And they used the music and the rhythms of the music especially to work by. Lots of times the slaves would be singing out in the fields and they'd be doing what is known as a call and response, where the person in charge of the slaves would be saying something and the slave, all the set of slaves called the gang would respond. And that's where you get that call and response. You know, they'd say something like, ho, I'm a ho, and they respond with, Emma, you're a bad girl. And they say, ho, Emma, ho, you turn around, dig a hole in the ground. Ho, Emma, ho. And then the former would say, Emma, you must be from the country. And it sort of took their mind. The foreman's job was to get the job done, but to take their mind off of the work. And they did it through the rhythms.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It's sort of like what they do in the Army today. You see a bunch of soldiers running, and they're singing a song. And the rhythm of the song is regulating the pace of the work. All of that comes back from slavery. But if you look even further back, it all comes back from Africa.
Was there any kindness with their feeling towards the slaves, or just was it just a matter of ownership, or they did feel about them as if they were something of a family?
Well, you know, it's hard to say that the masters were all mean, and it's hard to say that the masters were all good. There were masters who were both benevolent to their slaves, and there were some that were less benevolent. It all depended on the relationship between the master and the slave. What folks have to realize is that you're talking about humans.
Yes.
And no two humans treat their property alike.
Same way.
That's right. And always, the slaves are always, no matter what their relationship is, the slaves are always at the mood or the whim of the master.
Yes.
You know, if the master wins a whole lot of money on Saturday, he's going to be happy. If he loses it that night, everybody's going to be upset.
And this is one of the plantations which prospered in Virginia because of slave labour. The Berkeley Estate is a very beautiful place which was rather knocked about a bit in 1862 when 150,000 Union soldiers camped here when they were trying to take Richmond. Among them was a 12-year-old drummer boy called John Jameson. Remarkably, the estate is owned today by his son, Mr. Malcolm Jameson.
The reason my father was here was because of my uncle, my father's older brother. They came over from Scotland on a sailing vessel, landed in New York City, and another Scotchman had found them a home to live in. And this man, they appreciated a whole lot, had been drafted into the Army. In those days, you could either pay $300 or get out of the draft or get a substitute. So my uncle decided he'd be the substitute because this man's wife and children were running after him crying. He felt sorry for him, and he told my father, said, "John, you go up and tell your mother I've gone to war." He said, "I don't know whose war it is. I've only been here 10 days, what side I'm on, but I feel sorry for this family." And that's how Uncle Walter got here.
Yes, he was a good man, wasn't
he? He was a daredevil.
Yes.
He got the 28th Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yes.
And he did all kind of daring things during the war. Led the charge at Petersburg and Fort Harrison. He was recognized as being a wild soldier. But the war, bullets couldn't kill him.
No.
Everybody was shot around him, blown up. And actually, he would not be harmed.
No.
But after the war, Uncle Walter went to pieces. He got to drinking bourbon whiskey and running around with an opera singer.
Yes.
And the opera singer and the whiskey killed Uncle Walter when bullets couldn't do it.
Yes. Which side did your uncle fight on?
This was the northern side.
Yes.
And my wife's family all fought on the southern side, which was very typical in those days of the war, the brothers and sons fighting against each other during that war. That was the greatest massacre of cousins and that sort of thing there ever was.
Yes.
This is the Southern White House, Miss Hannah, the headquarters of the Confederacy. It's been magnificently restored. We welcome you here, and we'd like for you to come in and have a look around.
Thank you very much.
Please, come in.
Thank you. One final reminder of the Civil War during my stay in Virginia.
Miss Hannah, we have come into the entrance hall of the White House, and as you look around, you will see that it is restored almost to the exact appearance that the Jefferson Davis family would have known during its occupancy here.
Yes.
All of the top leading politicians of the Confederacy, commanding generals were here. And on the table, I'm going to show you a very interesting artifact that we have. This is Robert E. Lee's personal Bible, and you will see that he inscribed it with his signature here, and it's one of our very important treasures.
Yes. And it's lovely book.
Oh, it's a beautiful Bible.
Yes. Very neat.
And if you look right ahead of you, Miss Hannah, on the wall is a portrait of Jefferson Davis. And he, of course, was the President of the Confederate States of America. And I think that you'll note that he bears quite a striking resemblance to Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, I thought it, to tell the truth, I thought it was Abraham Lincoln.
Well, a lot of people make that
does.
mistake when they come and visit us here.
Yes. Yes, there is a resemblance.
Very strong resemblance.
Yes.
And in fact, Miss Hannah, Jefferson Davis was Abraham Lincoln's #1 opponent throughout the entire years of the Civil War.
From the Confederate flag to our own Union Jack. In the centre of Richmond, there is a traditional English pub. The landlord is Mr. Terry O'Neill, a true patriot and a real character.
Hi, Hannah. Welcome to America, love.
Thank you.
How are you?
All right.
You liking it up to now?
Oh, yes, very much.
Good to hear.
Yes.
Well, just telling you a little bit about myself. I'm from Liverpool.
Yes.
And as you can guess by my little accent, but I was used to go away to sea.
Yes.
And I jumped ship in New York, and I was up there for about 15 years.
Yes.
In the restaurant business.
Yes.
You know, I looked at it in the sense, you know, on the ships we were waiters, so when we got off, we got a job as waiters on, you know, around New York.
Yes.
And I got married and We were down there for about 15 years.
Yes.
And we had a couple of little babies.
Yes.
So when they started toddling around, it was time to get out of New York.
Yes.
So we come down to Virginia to see when we got married on our honeymoon, funny enough.
Yes.
And we liked what we'd seen, so the wife and I decided to come and stay in Virginia.
Yes, a nice
and
place.
Very nice, yeah.
Too.
And they're very British oriented down here.
Yes.
A lot more than like New York. New York is a bit more cosmopolitan, you know,
Yes.
a bit of everything.
Yes.
But down in Virginia, they're not. And we've got a little. I built this pub and made a little bit of Britain in downtown
Yes.
Richmond.
Yes.
And as you know, I'm from Liverpool with my accent, and I miss the Liverpool Football Club because
Yes.
I was there every week, screaming and shouting at them. And when I was living over there, they couldn't win an argument. And
No.
I come to America, and they start winning all kinds of cups.
Yes.
And it cost me a fortune going back and forth, you know.
Yes.
And that's one of the basic things I miss is the football. And of course, I think we'll do it this year, next year I should say. This year we had a bad year.
Yes.
But we do this every 30 years, we have bad years.
Yes.
We let someone else win it once in a while.
Yes.
And then we come back.
Yes. Oh, well.
And, well, you were lucky this year, you had a Yorkshire club in the FA Cup.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they had a good run. They had 2 cups, which was
Yes.
very unusual. To do.
You know more about it than I do,
True,
because I
yeah.
know nothing at all about sport.
Well, a lot of people from Yorkshire don't. No, I'm joking. But being from Lancashire, see, we know a bit more about soccer than Yorkshire.
Oh yes, well I'll sit on the fence for that one.
Right. Say nothing till you see a lawyer.
Yes.
If anything is more British in Virginia than Mr. O'Neill's establishment, then it must be this place. Agecroft Hall was built in England in the 18th century and transported brick by brick to Richmond in 1926 by a very rich local tobacco merchant. It's a museum now, and the director, Mr. Richard Moxley, was anxious to learn the secrets of a particular English tradition dear to my heart.
You've never tasted any
Well,
before?
I've had tea, but I don't know how to serve it or how to prepare it.
No.
And I'm wondering, maybe you can show me how it's done.
Well, I'll try, although I'm only an expert at drinking it, not making it. I'm not really an authority. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Would you pour the tea for me? Because I really don't know how to do this. In the United States, we don't have tea in the afternoon.
No? Oh, well, with pleasure, I'll try. I'm very clumsy. Do you have sugar?
No, I don't take sugar, but maybe I should try. Should I try it with this?
Well, not if you don't like it. It'll spoil it. But as long as I can have plenty of tea, I'll be happy. It's one of the necessities of life.
Have you had a good cup of tea since you've been in this country?
Odd ones. We had a few problems, but odd ones, odd good cups of tea, which is it's nice when it is forthcoming.
Mm-hmm. What's the secret of making a good cup of tea?
Well, I'm too lazy to do it, or else I think probably you should warm the pot.
Warm the pot.
And then dry it out, and then put the tea in, brew it with boiling water, and let it stand for 5 minutes.
5
Longer
minutes.
and better, providing it doesn't get cold.
Now, how do you know when it's brewed? You just when it gets dark? Or,
Yes, you can see the colour. I mean, it's the testing things when you pour it out.
It seems like you brew it a lot longer than most people do in this country.
Yes.
We kind of dunk the tea bag just for a minute or two.
Yes, that's no good unless you want it like what we call washing up water.
Washing up water?
Yes, it's no good. You know, you need to have it in for a while.
Well, I'm kind of anxious to test this.
Oh, well, I think I put too much milk in, but please, I hope I haven't ruined it.
It's delicious. It's relaxing too, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, and also very thirst quenching, more than anything else, even on a very hot day. That's the way to live, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
finally, I rose to a dizzy height to meet a former mayor of Richmond, Mrs. Jolene Williams, who was also keen to promote the bond between Richmond and the mother country. How high are we up here? We seem to be way up.
Well, we are just about in the clouds. We're 20 stories, 20 floors up, having lunch together. And
I've never been so high up in the building before. Isn't it a lovely view out
yes,
there?
now that's the James River.
Yes.
It runs through the center of the city of our city of Richmond and was named for King James I of England.
Yes.
So another tie, you see, we have with England.
Next week, I visit the birthplace of jazz, New Orleans, and the bayous of Cajun country.
Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water. I think one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
New Orleans. It's not just a place, it's an experience, and dedicated to jazz. It's inescapable. There's jazz on virtually every street corner in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And there's a famous cafe on the edge of the French Quarter where it is traditional to take sustenance before getting to grips with the heart of the city.
Oh, and the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, yes, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints win the Super Bowl. When Martin Anderson kick that field goal. Oh, yeah, we are gonna go crazy in New Orleans. When the Saints win the Super Bowl, yeah, Thank you for the clapping. All right, anyone else want to get a tape before I play the next song?
Now this is the Café du Monde, renowned for its café au lait and beignets. How do you find them?
Oh, they're very nice. I would prefer them without the sugar. They would be all right on their own. The coffee's lovely. Thank you.
And how about the music?
Well, I don't think I would listen to it from choice.
Well, the trumpeter. Did you not like the trumpeter?
Oh, it's very good. It's very good. It's all right, yes.
Not your style?
As I say, I wouldn't maybe choose to listen. But it's all right.
Sort of
it's
music?
bearable.
What sort of music do you like in the jazz?
Oh, dear.
The old-fashioned kind. I don't really, just the old-fashioned kind. I don't know any particular pieces. You did play one, I've forgotten now what it was. An Amazing Grace, but it needs something more backup.
Well, we'll try and find... That's okay, is it?
Yes.
Anyway, we'll try and find something more to your taste later.
Thank you. Thank you. Heat is something else you cannot escape here. It's like a slow oven. Seeking shade is the first essential on a walking tour of the jazz area, which has some very old buildings with pretty balconies, and one particularly historic place.
Hannah, I know it doesn't look much. In fact, it could do with a lick of paint, but this is Preservation Hall, and they say that this is the very spot where jazz was born.
Yes.
It's a hallowed spot. Jazz enthusiasts from all around the world come here, and at night it's jam-packed full. In fact, you probably couldn't get within 10 yards. And, as I say, pity they don't take a paintbrush out, but maybe they want to keep it looking
just
like
as
that.
it was.
Just as it was.
Probably.
Afternoon. All right. You don't need shoe shine today. What's the matter there? Welcome to New Orleans anyway.
Thank you. Yes, I have some in my room that need attention. I see you're a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, I spent 2 years, 5 months, 14 days over there.
Yes.
That was from 68 to 71.
Yes.
I came back here. I'm a retired chef.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
So you still enjoy cooking?
I love cooking.
Yes.
I still, every now and then, get a wild hair and I'll throw something together, you know.
Yes. And so you do this?
Yeah, this keeps me busy.
Yes.
You know?
And meeting people.
Yeah, I meet people from all over the world.
Yes.
I mean, everywhere.
Yes.
We're very friendly people.
Yes.
In general, you know.
Well.
We help you if we can.
Yes, that's very important. I think anywhere in New Orleans, anywhere, if people are nice and friendly and kindly.
Well, here you have to. Here we try to avoid the greed and selfishness type thing,
yes,
and get more into people as a people. You know,
yes.
Not too many places you go in New Orleans that you find a black-white relationship split apart. You find it as one. You know?
Yes.
You can go into some of these bars in here and like, oh well, let's take Mudbugs for instance, across the river in Belle Chase.
Yes.
I go there with some people, and we look like a fly in a bowl of milk. But you talk about have some fun.
Yes.
Girl, we getting it on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, the good Lord made us all, didn't he?
That is true.
Bourbon Street, New Orleans. It comes alive before noon, and they compete for your custom and your coppers until the dawn. Now, no one loves music more than me, But perhaps the thing that impressed me more than anything else about New Orleans was in full view of my hotel bedroom window. The mighty Mississippi, Old Man River himself. And on the Mississippi Queen, you had the best of both worlds. A trip on the river with music every inch of the way. The Mississippi Queen is the largest steamboat ever built, and it was created, would you believe, by the same man who designed the QE2. He obviously thinks big. And it seems that the current enthusiasm in the United States for living theatre has reached the Mississippi. A certain famous gentleman from the past came to pay me a call.
Hannah? Hi. How are you? I'm Mark Twain.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Well, are you enjoying your visit here?
Oh, yes. The ship's lovely.
It is?
Yes, it is.
Have you read any of my books?
I'm sorry I haven't.
Oh, you must. The Innocents Abroad?
Well... Oh, yes, my kind of music. Anyway, at the end of that voyage, I went back to see the French Quarter again, at night, when the noise level really tests the eardrums. I went in search of more music to suit my taste. Yes, I know I'm fussy, and I started at Preservation Hall, where it all began.
Well, that's jazz. Is that the sort of style you like?
It's better, yes. But preferable out here than in there. It would be too noisy inside, I think.
I think we could manage to squeeze in if you wanted to.
Oh, thank you. I think it's nicer out here where it's not so loud. I think indoors it would be a bit too loud. But it's better than some we heard not as noisy as yesterday. Yes. It was rather crowded inside, and in my opinion, drums should be used sparingly, if at all.
Spotted you straight away?
Yes, where do you come from?
Bradford.
Oh, yes. It is surprising where you bump into fellow Yorkshire folk. Gone midnight, in Bourbon Street, New Orleans, of all places.
Scotland. I've seen you on the television too.
Yes.
You're looking well.
Oh, you doing?
there.
I'm Sam. How are you doing?
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you, my love.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You know, I'm so glad I've met you. I kept thinking about you while we've been away because we watched your programme just before we set off for our around the world travels.
Yes.
I'm so glad we've met you because I kept thinking, oh, what would Hannah say about this? Like, wouldn't we?
thank you ever so much. It's been lovely meeting you. And thank you. A good journey home and enjoy your Yorkshire puddings and dinner. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Anyway, I continued to search for the music I wanted to hear and found it at the end of the street, real Dixieland, the old classic kind of jazz. Only a few miles down the road from New Orleans, you enter a different world. The bayous of Louisiana echo to a different music too, and the food they eat is quite alarming. They told me that young alligator is very tasty, but I declined the opportunity to give an opinion. Most of the people who live and work in the bayous are fishermen, descended from the French immigrants who long ago settled the Quebec area of Canada. They were driven out 200 years ago, and a group finished up in Louisiana. They are known today as Cajuns, and it seems they have held fast down the years to their own distinctive culture, as the writer and photographer Greg Gerard explained. He is a Cajun himself. What kind of music was that?
That's French Cajun music. It's an old tradition around here. The people here still speak a form of 17th century French.
Yes.
Which developed without a dictionary, and it's not like standard French, it's quite a different language.
Greg is also a fisherman, but much of his time is spent fighting to preserve Cajun country. He lives on the edge of the bayous and is engaged on a very personal crusade. Thank you.
When my grandfather bought this land, it was all in trees.
Yes.
And he set up a big sawmill and began cutting the trees into lumber in order to pay for the land. But now I've inherited 100 acres of this land, and I decided that I would put mine back into trees.
Oh, that was good to replace it again.
So what I've done for the last 17 or 18 years now is I've planted about 30,000 trees.
Fancy, 30,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a fascinating
This is a white oak
tree.
with a wisteria vine.
Ah.
Yeah. I've planted about 16 or 17 varieties of trees, oaks and cypress, and they begin right here. This is the beginning. At one time you could see straight to the road. There was no obstruction at all. All right, my plan with the trees I'm planting is to recreate a kind of forest that people can stop and walk in and just have a peaceful place to go, because the world is getting overcrowded, as I guess you know.
Yes, it
And
is.
there are very few quiet, peaceful places, and I don't allow anybody to hunt here, and just people to come in and destroy anything.
No, well, it's a shame, because there's a lot of wrong things done in the name of progress. And lovely for people to have somewhere to come. Greg A true countryman is an authority on the bayous.
A million acres.
Almost a million acres, 980,000 acres, I guess.
Yes.
All of this water originates either in the Mississippi River or in the Red River, which comes from Louisiana. In the Atchafalaya Basin, this area, Spillwick, gets about 30% of the Mississippi River's water.
Yes.
The Red River comes through Oklahoma and Texas into North Louisiana and then directly into the Atchafalaya River. And while the Mississippi is a little further east, and water coming into this area from the Mississippi River is controlled by huge locks and gates.
Yes.
Otherwise, the entire Mississippi River would come into the Atchafalaya. It would change course. 1927, we had a tremendous flood in the whole lower Mississippi Valley. The state of Mississippi and lower Louisiana were just covered with water for several weeks.
Yes.
And people in the lower lying areas had to move to towns that are higher in elevation. And they lived in tents, in canvas tents provided by the U.S. Army. These are cypress trees, and there's water here year-round. And what's hanging from them is Spanish moss. There's an old legend about an Indian brave and an Indian maiden, and they were to get married, and the Indian maiden died, and her hair was cut off, and eventually the wind spread it into the trees, and it began growing, and the legend is that this is the hair from the Indian maiden who died before her wedding day.
It's sad, but a lovely story, isn't it?
But the Spanish moss is it's an air plant, so it doesn't take anything from the trees.
No.
And there's nothing else like it, I guess.
Then we came across a very unusual dwelling.
There's a hole in the floor right in the middle of the main room. You can uncover it. It has a cover that goes over it. And when it's cold or rainy, you can take that cover off and fish right from inside your bedroom.
My word.
Because the water is right under the houseboat.
That's a bit much for a bedroom.
Right there, yeah. It's quite a place, huh?
It is.
He's pulled up all that cypress driftwood from the lake here. What's all around us here, Hannah, is water hyacinth, or a lot of people here call them water lilies. It may seem that we're in a field, but actually we're floating in about 10 feet of water. And the water hyacinths grow, of course, and float on the water.
You would never think so.
No, it seems that we're on land practically. It's so solid.
Just like a lovely field.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. Lovely.
The wildlife is lovely to look at too, with certain exceptions.
There are quite a few alligators here. The sun is setting now. Quite a few alligators. You don't necessarily see them in the daytime because they tend to be afraid of people, which is probably a good idea.
Yes.
But at night, if you came out here, whenever the weather is warm, you would see red eyes.
Fancy.
They have very red eyes when you flash a light on them.
Yes.
So this is a technique that some alligator hunters use to find alligators at night.
Yes.
And they tend to be less cautious at night. They don't. The light kind of freezes them. They don't know what to do about it. The same thing for bullfrogs. A lot of people in this area catch and eat bullfrogs, which can weigh 2 or 3 pounds. You go at night with a light, and it's shining in their eyes. They don't move until you can grab them. Normally, alligators would not bother anyone.
No.
Only when there's a mother alligator with babies or on a nest with eggs, she might be very protective. The other time alligators become dangerous is if they're being fed on a regular basis, and someone goes there and doesn't have any food, and they expect to be fed, and they can become aggressive.
Disappointed when it's not there.
Yeah, they're very powerful animals, of course, immensely powerful and fast. And a big alligator can weigh 700 or 800 pounds, and can
treacherous.
Right here, Hannah, watching this sunset, there's an interstate highway crossing this lake, but it's like we're not even conscious of it. Civilization can go on, and we can still find this kind of serenity right here in the middle of all of it, it's kind of unusual. There's a big city of Baton Rouge on one side of this place and Lafayette on the other side, and still notice how quiet it is here and how peaceful.
It's lovely. You would never think it was more.
You never think there's more civilization everywhere around.
No, and high skyscrapers.
Yeah. Of course, we all appreciate the beauty of it and the quietness and the naturalness of it all.
Yes.
And of course, a sunset is going to show that better than anything else.
Next week, Texas at last, and I have to make a major decision about how I return to Britain.
Hannah Hauxwell, daleswoman, spinster, once the most obscure person in Britain, now a national heroine. The story of her life alone, struggling to survive on a pitifully small income, obliged to collect her drinking water from a stream, and working unaided to raise cattle on her isolated hill farm through a succession of savage winters, has become legend. Hannah's love affair with the public has lasted more than 2 decades, spanning her new life after leaving her farm to travel, for the first time and in some style. But there's no doubt that her heart remains in the place which was home for more than 60 years.
It's my world. And I don't know. And it's lovely. I think lovely scenes. The moonlight on the water. I think it's one of the loveliest things.
Uncertain health and advancing years forced Hannah to leave, but she submerged the pain in a new career as an author, and particularly in travel.
Texas at last, the final stage of my tour of the United States. Texas was the place I had mentally put at the top of my list from the start. Now, there were no cowboys to be seen here in Houston, the 4th largest city in America, but it had skyscrapers just as overwhelming as those in New York. Looking up made you feel quite dizzy. There is much more to Texas than cowboys, as I discovered when I went to visit the Space Center. It was right here in Houston that the American space program was organized and run from the start. The approach to the Space Center was really spectacular. This rocket, which I understand was called Saturn V, seemed to stretch for 1/4 of a mile, like a sleeping skyscraper. And the men who rode these enormous rockets to the moon were all trained in Houston. They certainly lived very strange lives up there in space.
This is our Skylab 1G trainer, and this is what the astronauts use to train for their Skylab missions. This is a simulated weightlessness here, because of course when you're amazing, isn't it?
It is.
And here you can see an exercise area and also the shower.
Oh, yes. That's the shower.
Yes. In space, you have to shower in an enclosed area because otherwise the water droplets will just float everywhere and they'll get into the electronics and make everything a little unpleasant. So.
Yes. It's a different thing altogether, isn't it?
That's right, that's right. As you can see, this was a recreation of what was actually seen on the moon. This is a lunar rover trainer. The little moon buggies that they used.
What is it really about? It looks a bit, it's rather like a winter scene, isn't it?
Sort of desolate, isn't
cold.
it?
Yes.
And you can see our planet. And this particular buggy was one of the ones that they used for training the astronauts in preparation for their lunar flights. And this is the command module for the Apollo 17 flight.
Oh?
This has been to the moon.
Oh, fancy. It's been a long way, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
You would think they would perhaps wonder too, particularly in the early days, whether they would ever get back again.
Yeah, I imagine it crossed their minds, but every Apollo flight came back safely.
Yes, well, that was really good.
And now, Hannah, we're coming to our lunar samples vault. And you can touch a piece of the moon.
I have to confess I wasn't too keen about touching a piece of the moon. Silly, I know, and I cannot explain just why.
They're kept in a vault over at Johnson Space Center, the other samples from the moon, and they're very, very valuable. In fact, the building that they're in is safe from hurricanes, tornadoes, any kind of storm or earthquake.
Yes. Still nice, I think, to view the moon from Mother Earth.
That's right, that's right.
Then I stepped back in time to the middle of the last century. This is San Jacinto near Houston.
Well, Hannah, another memorial.
Yes.
Another battleground.
Yes. Unfortunately, there's so many of them, isn't there?
Yeah.
But it's a magnificent memorial.
It is. Now, you can say that this is where Texas was born, because it was in 1836 that the Texan Army under General Sam Houston, after whom Houston, of course, is called, defeated the much bigger army of Santa Anna, General Santa Anna of Mexico. He was the one who killed everyone at the Alamo. We're going to see the Alamo later. And but what the Alamo did was win time for Sam Houston to gather his army together, and he won the final battle here. And the Republic of Texas was created.
Yes.
Did you know that Texas was a separate nation?
No, I didn't.
The Lone Star State.
Yes, one had heard of that. I like that, the term.
Yeah, and I think it was about 10 years later they became part of the United States and went to war with Mexico again. A little problem over the borders.
Yes. San Antonio is less than 200 miles from Houston, and it is a special place to all those born in the Lone Star State.
Sacred ground, Hannah.
Oh, yes.
It's the Alamo.
Yes.
That's where less than 200 Texans, or people supporting the cause of Texas, fought 4,000 Mexican troops under that General Santa Anna.
Yes.
And they held them off to give Sam Houston time to organize his army back in Houston.
Yes.
And they refused to surrender.
Yes.
So when it was overrun, Santa Anna slaughtered everyone.
Yes. Despite that shadow from the past,
the Mexican influence is still very noticeable in San Antonio. The music in particular. Then I went deep into the very heart of Texas, to cowboy country. Having acquired the appropriate headwear, the town of Bandero looked very much the part, with hitching rails for the horses and a blacksmith's forge straight out of the past. But even in Bandero, the horse is no longer the main source of work for the forge. It turns out more decorative ironwork than horseshoes. Although there were, it appears, signs of a revival locally, as one of the proprietors explained. I think with us, after the tractors machinery came, and for a while there wasn't so many horses. Blacksmiths had to do other things.
Yes, well, after the tractors and everything, they died off, but
Yes.
they're back now.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're coming back.
More people are keeping horses,
Yes.
and so that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
And it's more recreational now, and a little racing and everything.
Yes.
But more so than they don't work them as hard as they used to. They used to plow with them before
Yes.
the tractors.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, modern machinery has eased horses
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot, and that's a good thing.
One of these days we'll get away from cars and we'll go back to horses, won't we?
Well, will a lot of people know, younger people won't know how to gear them up and yoke them up, will they? Who
Well,
haven't
that's
been
true,
brought
too.
up with
Yeah, that's
horses.
true. We have a lot of horses in this area, though.
Yes. Yes, probably more than, or as many as anywhere else. Probably more than.
I think more than in Texas, probably more than any other state.
Yes, because horses are still used, are they not, on the ranches?
The ranches
with
and the rodeos.
For the cattle, yes.
Yes, and the rodeos.
Yes. The music was Mexican style once again at the Mayan Ranch, which is run principally for tourists. There I met Don Hicks, who introduced himself as the head wrangler.
Happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming.
I'm happy to be here.
Well,
That was,
thank you, ma'am.
one of the main reasons of my visit to the USA, to see the cowboys.
Yes, they're always right here in Texas.
Right, yes.
We got lots. We're the cowboy capital of the world here in Bandera, Texas.
Yes, the real cowboys.
The-
I'm not interested in the, the fakes and
Right,
get up. No,
right,
the people
right.
who really live and make the living and work with the cattle.
Yes, we have 7 world champions right here in Bandera that that do mostly calf roping, but they've been world champions. So it's really wonderful for a small town of Bandera having that many champions.
Yes.
We're seeing some real cowboys now, right?
Yes, I suppose so.
You don't sound so keen.
Well, the steers aren't very big, and there's two of them to catch it.
Yeah.
But I haven't really seen a lot of it. There's some nice horses I've managed to glimpse.
I believe it's the bull riding now, Hannah, so we'll watch that. Yeah.
And it turned out that I was sitting next to the girlfriend of one of the riders.
Your boyfriend's in this. He rides bulls? What, for fun or for a living? For fun? Oh, well, I wish him luck.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he was trampled when he got caught up in the harness.
Was he the one who was hurt?
Come here.
You sure? You don't look so sure. Well, he waved.
He hurt his arm 2 weeks ago, and it's not healed up yet.
Oh.
But he won't stay off us. He'll be all right.
That's his sport, is it?
What part of England are you from?
The north.
Yes. I entertained some people from New Zealand last week.
Yes, yes.
They have a big ranch over there.
Yes.
A lot more cattle than I can run.
Yes.
But they get 50 inches of rain. We don't get that here.
No. Believe you're having bother with the shortage of water.
Yes, ma'am.
And as a result, it's not easy to find large herds of cattle in Texas these days. When it doesn't rain, the grass doesn't grow enough to feed them properly. And the classic Texan Longhorn nearly disappeared for good.
Or the original Longhorn cattle came from probably Spain and from over in Europe back probably around Columbus's time, yes. maybe a little later than that. Back in the early 1900s, the Longhorn was becoming extinct and was going the way of the American buffalo.
Yes.
And my great-grandfather, who is also the ranch owner's father, was a real pioneer in the Longhorn business. And he noticed what was happening and decided to begin to build up a herd of Longhorns.
Yes. Thank you. Kush. Do you shout kush up? We used to shout kush up. Thank you. Kush up. There's a lot of heads to get. One will knock another out.
Yes, ma'am. They can be damaging to each other if they don't watch out.
Yes. A lot of people with us in our country don't like horns because of that.
Right.
I'm not keen on the dehorning mine, except Rosa had horns.
So many around here dehorn their cattle too, but if we dehorn these, we would defeat the purpose.
Yes. How many head of cattle have you, if you don't mind me asking?
We have about 150 from 2-year-old heifers to full-grown mature cows.
Now then, they can do funny things. Do they get fast with those horns ever?
Oh, on occasion they might, but these are very docile animals.
Yes,
but you have to watch them all the time.
Yes.
So.
Well, it's good that they are docile with horns
with those
like
horns,
that.
exactly.
If they were nasty, it would be pretty serious.
And on this, my last day in cowboy country, I too had a serious matter to deal with. At least for me it was serious. It was time to go home, and my original plan to sail back to Britain had fallen through. So I had to consider the prospect of boarding an aeroplane for the first time in my life.
Mrs. Hauxwell, how are you today?
Oh, all right, thank you.
Is your destination London?
Yes.
And you're checking 2 pieces of baggage?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes. Hats. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to look another way? Or?
Oh, no, it looked really nice where you had it.
Right.
Great.
So it says there, Hannah, non-stop to London Gatwick.
Yes, I haven't seen it yet.
How are you feeling?
Oh, well, it's, you know, that's it. I'm going and that's it.
Nervous?
I have to get home sometime. Well, I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it. Just hope for the best. I had managed to put off this moment for a long time, but it was an inevitability, I suppose.
Hannah, you did it.
Yes.
Anyway, welcome to the second half of the 20th century.
Right, thank you.
How did you enjoy the takeoff?
Well, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but it was all right.
It's a necessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We have to do that to get up here, then we can entertain you like this.
Yes. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
It's better when you're up, once you get up.
Well, wait till the landing.
Yes. Well, wait. Yes. There was nothing bad about it. Just it's a funny feeling when it's on the slope.
But you enjoyed it?
No, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it.
Are you going to do it again?
Well, we'll see. Hello there.
How do you do?
How
I'm
do
Paul
you do?
Howard, Captain.
How do
Very
you do?
nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Hello. That's
Hello
Jerry Dent,
there.
First Officer. Nice to meet you.
How do you do?
Pete Durham, our
How
flight
do you
engineer.
do? Yes.
Are you enjoying the flight?
All right. No, yes, thank
Yeah?
you. It's very comfortable.
Good. It's been nice and smooth, hasn't it?
Yes.
No sensation of movement at
No.
all, is there? See over there, those white lines in
Yes.
the sky? Those are contrails from the other aircraft ahead of
I
us.
see, yes.
You sometimes see them in the sky,
Yes,
up over the dales.
yes. So it's a busy route.
I'm from Yorkshire, you know.
Yeah, oh, that's good. Yes.
I was born in York and lived in Halifax.
Oh, my word,
the
yes.
early days of my life.
Oh, all good. A good people come to
All the best
Yorkshire,
people.
don't they? That's right, yes. And this leg of the journey back home to Yorkshire covered 5,000 miles and took nearly 9 hours, flying through the night.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's the captain here. Hope you managed to get some sleep during the night and you're enjoying your breakfast. Our present position is just over Land's End in Cornwall, and from here we're routing along the south coast towards Southampton and on to London Gatwick. The latest weather for London, it's a light northerly breeze. It's been raining a little bit. They've had some drizzle and a little bit of low cloud, but it's forecast to clear up during the morning. The latest temperature, it's 11 degrees Celsius, that's 52 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to get warmer during the day, of course. And we're still expecting to arrive on schedule at 7:30.
England's green and pleasant land below, and time to reflect on my experiences.
7 or 8 minutes now before we land.
Yes.
What do you think of flying now?
It's all right. Oh, it's comfortable, but it's always, you know, the same thing as I've always felt about it. It's all right when it's all right.
Just going back over the trip, what were the highlights? I mean, let's say which place was least attractive to you.
Oh, it's difficult to say. New York, mind, it was interesting to see. Not that keen on New York, City and
What about the best part? Which part? If you had to pick just one place to go back to, which would it be?
Oh, the Bayou.
But
Lafayette, Cajun country.
yes, Williamsburg and the Amish country, very close, both very close.
So Lafayette and the Cajun country first, and then Williamsburg and the Amish country sort of running close, joint second.
Yes, Washington and New Orleans, Mississippi.
That it's over?
Yes. Oh, yes. No, I'll go back again.